Hello to my fellow Kenyans. It's now time to think outside the box. If not, we are still technically inside that box, and the box is almost sealed because we are not ready to get ourselves outside that box anyway and anytime soon. Now listen, Kenya is a politically diverse society where others subscribe to the government, others align with the opposition, while the rest choose to remain neutral or undecided. And that's what we call freedom of association as provided under Article 36 of the Kenyan Constitution. Nevertheless, the system of leadership in Kenya right now is being questioned by a number of disgruntled Kenyans from all walks of life who feel like the government has let them down socially, politically, and economically, and therefore change is needed. And as we speak right now, with the recent merging of the opposition with the government, technically, Kenya has no opposition group. However, the new opposition bloc is now rebuilding up, and what is remaining on the playground is now what we call mass opposition or opposition by the people. Yes! Now, people being people and government being government, there are tools which are being used to help sway the people back into the government or sway the people at the same time against the government, depending on who uses it. So you can choose to call these sensitization tools, and you can as well choose to call it propaganda tools, depending on which side you are in or which purpose you are using the tools for. Yes! And these tools are the mode of communication like social media, radio, television, newspapers, and not forgetting vocal individuals across the country. Having said that, a number of things have been taking place in the country, both good and bad. For instance, people have taken to social media to express their dissatisfaction, expressing the way the government is not doing enough in handling a number of issues. And this has made a section of Kenyans to form various forums and departments on social media. For example, there is a replica High Court of Kenya on social media, replica Directorate of Criminal Investigation, yes! Replica court judges, prosecutors, counsels, or lawyers, especially on TikTok. And also even someone decided to open up a private police station, but that is a story of another day. Now, for instance, this social media replica court sits, invites people to attend a copycat of court sessions on social media, present cases, get a ruling, and find solutions, which is good and bad at the same time. It is good in a manner that this now helps put people to be morally checked, but also helps in community policing and so on. But at the same time, this is bad because it now makes citizens to believe that since legitimate government institutions have failed to work effectively to the expectation of the people, people have no option but rather to take matters into their own hand to solve problems, which at a time people end up causing severe destructions and damage of properties. What you should understand is that as all this is taking place in the country, the government, on the other hand, is not asleep. And here comes a major government tool called divide and rule. Yes! This is a very important tool that the government uses to gain and maintain political power by using divisive measures, and that is by encouraging division among the people. People who are divided ideologically and politically can easily be ruled than people who are united with one voice. In other words, people who are united can easily bring down a regime with little or no challenge. Now, remember, Kenya is the most active African country on social media based on time spent. This is followed by South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, and Egypt, respectively. I think I'm right. This also goes hand in hand with the accessibility of cheap internet. And because of that, many Kenyans have found themselves on various social media platforms, creating forums and replica government departments and institutions whereby they can now meet, share their experiences and dissatisfactions with the government. And this gives way to a very important thing, that is freedom of expression as provided under Article 33 of the Kenyan Constitution. This has also made Kenyans to go even a notch higher by identifying individuals, businesses, and institutions which engage in illegal activities against the citizens. Yes! And these individuals, businesses, or institutions seem to have indirect or direct protection or association with the current government. And as a result, these individuals or businesses end up untouched. And as an alternative, people now end up invading them with mass protests and attacks in which destructions occur in the process because the government, anyway, is doing little to intervene for the best interest of the people. So this kind of unity and one voice online is increasingly becoming a major threat to the ruling elite and the government. And also it is an opportunity to the opposition groups, individuals and other interested stakeholders at large who collectively have diverse and personal interests in the country. And this may fall on either side, either positive or negative, for their own interest. So this therefore calls for these groups to throw one major card that exposes a major loophole that has been haunting the Kenyan society for decades, and that is none other than dividing Kenyans under tribal lines. Now, Kenya is known to be one of the most tribal countries in the world, where people are usually politically affiliated under tribal lines, with their tribal kingpins holding strategic leadership positions. However, the Gen Zs is the only generation in Kenya which is trying hard to break and abolish this tribal identity and syndrome out of Kenya. The Gen Zs, together with the millennials, have now become a formidable force on social media, putting pressure and calling out the government and any other unfathomable individual or group to do things the right way for the best interest of Kenyans. Now, having said that, the ruling elite, the government, individuals with personal political interests, and opposition groups, of course, are also not sleeping. This therefore takes them back to the Gen Zs and millennials stronghold to look for them there, and that is social media, and that is where this tribal card is finally placed. Now, the Gen Zs and millennials happen to make the majority of the population in the country, the majority group of youths in Kenya, who are mostly unemployed, ambitious, and ready to make ends meet at all costs. So this is also a group of people who happen to be extremely vocal and very strong on social media, both in Kenya and across the world. So any views, opinion, and demands or call for action communication done by them through social media happen to be of great impact towards how Kenya is running or how the country should be run. But remember, there still remains a small vacuum that is a major weakness in Kenyan society, and that is tribalism. This now brings us back again to the ruling elite, government, individuals with personal political interest, and opposition groups, some of whom now selfishly start funding some of these admins and hosts who own these powerful social media groups, which is being run by millennials and Gen Zs, of course, so that they can come up with the topics that can build a road bridge of tribal sentiments aimed at dividing Kenyans for selfish motives. Now, that is why you can suddenly witness some of the social media platforms cropping up, speaking vernacular and identifying themselves on tribal lines, claiming that they are being victimized in some spheres of life in favor of other tribes. And at the same time, you find that they are calling themselves to have unity to boost their own interests. And as a result, you can suddenly hear some slogans coming up like Gamer for Gamer, Fire on the Lake, Fire on the Mountain, and so on. These slogans are good and bad in the same measure, depending on how you want to use it. This has now resulted into social media wars, that is one tribe against the other, one social media group against the other, and a group of people under specific affiliations is ideologically disagreeing with the other, and so on. Now, to the Kenyan government, this is good for business because it is an excellent diversionary tool. The more people get divided and fighting on social media, the more the government is at peace. Because this keeps people who happen to be the majority concentrate on various social media wars and forget keeping the government at check against the real issues that is affecting a common man on ground. And before you know it, the Kenyan society is split, while the ruling elite, individuals with political interests and political groups remain strong than ever before at the expense of a common man. Now, the Gen Zs happen to be one extraordinary generation that Kenya has ever had. Though this is a generation that has technically never experienced the real tribal wars in the country, because during the 2007 post-election violence in Kenya, this group of people was barely below 7 to 8 years, and they were not really in a position to understand how painful it was to experience such clashes on the ground. So because they were barely innocent kids by then. This is also a generation which was not yet born when the 1994 Rwanda genocide took place. But one amazing thing with this generation is that they don't know tribe. They don't know political affiliations. They are one. Though some of them lost their older millennial brothers and houses burnt during the post-election violence because they were young and they saw it. And therefore, this makes them to have a clue on how bad tribalism can get. And therefore, this falls back to millennials and Gen Zs who influence these big social media platforms, mine included, to be aware of the negative outcome of tribal sentiments. Yes! Remember, the 1994 Rwandan genocide, in which almost 1 million people perished and 2 million people fled the country, was sparked by a single mere radio communication inciting one community against the other. The Kenya's 2007 post-election violence that many people ended up perishing and displaced started from a single mere argument in the market by one woman with the tribal sentiment against the other, and the result was Kenya burning up. Therefore, much as we Kenyans enjoy freedom of expression under Article 33 of the Kenyan Constitution, we should mind about its limitations that should be avoided at all costs. And that is things like incitement to violence, propaganda for war, hate speech, advocacy for hate like ethnic incitement, vilification of others or incitement to cause harm, discrimination based on grounds, and so on. This man! So, as Kenyans, we should stop being emotional, stop being swayed socially, politically, and economically on tribal grounds, and stand as one with unity, identifying ourselves as Kenyans, and with that, change shall come as a block without which history shall keep repeating itself, and the so-called poor governance and its systems shall be here to stay. Jesus! So pull up your socks. The ball is on the ground. Make a comeback, because as it stands right now, the government has scored 1 and Kenyans 0. It's up to you to understand these words the way you want. Think outside the box. Subscribe to my YouTube channel and leave me alone. Bye-bye.